talking about Djokovic, we've got some news that kind of concerns him as well. The player union that sort of he partly helped set up, the PTPA, they have filed a lawsuit against the ATP and WTA tours with a whole number of points on. It's 163 pages long. So if you want some heavy reading, perhaps you can dig it out and read through it all. But essentially, the lawsuit is criticizing the schedule, the ranking systems, control over image rights. And the PTPA say in this lawsuit they are acting on behalf of the entire player population by filing this lawsuit against tennis's governing bodies. When in reality, it's actually only a small cohort of the players actually belong to the PTPA who are involved. This is quite a meaty topic, isn't it? And it's quite controversial, and it's caused quite a bit of consternation and comments from around the tennis world. Chris, I'm going to come to you firstly. What do you make of this lawsuit? All 163 pages of it. I know you love a legal kind of suit, but have you read it all? Have you been able to access it and have a read?
I've read as much of it as I felt I needed to, Kim.
Okay.
There is a lot in there, but you do quite quickly realize that this is a bit of a kitchen sink lawsuit. I think they're really sort of throwing at the wall and seeing what sticks, because it covers all sorts of things from the length of a season all the way down to, saying that players should be able to play exhibitions wherever they want to, that they shouldn't be like have to play on this one tour, loss of image rights, all these sorts of things. And I think that there are aspects of it that ring true, which are around the fact that players should not be playing at 3 a.m. I think that would have made more sense to me if they'd limited what they talked about to be much more around, the fact that players are not treated correctly. And I think I would have had much more sympathy with this and much more understanding of it. I do think also some of the stuff relating to the ITIA, and the fact that they are providing some legal support for players like Tara Moore, I think that's where I really like the PTPA. But in terms of the wider piece here, I mean, it is a bit of a mess, if I'm being completely honest. I'm not a lawyer, but what I do know is that this is a very sweeping document which tries to put everything in as to why that these governing bodies operate as like a cartel, is one of the quotes that they say. And I do think that you can't say you speak for the entire player population, because actually you don't. There's a very small list of plaintiffs who are involved here. And so I think even the publicity of trying to say this, I think, is actually kind of concerning, especially when one of your co-founders, Novak Djokovic, is not one of them. It doesn't necessarily make you think that he was as confident in this document, or he thought this would be as positive a document. I mean, if he did, he would have signed it.
Yeah, because Djokovic is the co-founder of the PTPA, but with this lawsuit, he's actually said, well, there are things that I agree with, but there are also things I don't agree with. He said that some of the wording was quite strong, but that he, said that the legal team must kind of know what they're doing. And so he's not really agreeing with it all. He's not fully backing it, which is it is a bad look actually for the PTPA. I think that he's not actually fully behind this. And I mean, but I agree with him in the sense that there are some things, yeah, like as a general fan, like you agree with that shouldn't be happening, that we need to change. But there are other bits that, maybe
Bit of
aren't
a
the right
stretch.
battles to fight right now. Yeah. So he didn't sign the letter. And then other players who have distanced themselves, Carlos Alcaraz, who said that, again, there are things he agrees with and things that he doesn't, but he doesn't agree with the lawsuit, generally speaking. So it's caused a bit of a divide. And the ATP and WTA tours have come out to say that they reject the claims in the PTPA. They're going to obviously defend their position, and that this is kind of causing a lot of unnecessary diversion from the work that they want to do on the tours. What do you make of their response, Joel, that we've seen from the two tours?
Yeah, I think they obviously they need to stand their ground, and as Chris said, I think that there are things that they that are weaknesses for them that the PTPA to me have attacked, and I think that's fair. But I also think there are things that the ATP and WTA tours are doing at the moment that is in the players' interests. I think for me, it kind of comes down to this kind of conversation on this feeling that the ATP and WTA, they're working for their tournaments as opposed to their players, and it's almost kind of like, well, have they got the balance right there? Because we've seen recently with the things like reducing like the influence and the impact of like 250s on the calendar, making it more kind of focused around the premium events, the Masters events, and just having a really inflated tour, 11 months long. It sort of feels like it's there to basically kind of make as much money as possible. So I understand from that kind of business perspective that this is what they want to do, but I feel like if you go back to kind of the history of why these organizations were set up, they were there to kind of protect kind of players' rights. And I think over time, I think the fact that they are doing things to help players more now, I think acknowledges that. Even things, I know it's sort of helped by kind of Saudi Arabia, but like the WTA with their new maternity policy. But I sort of wonder where this is going to go in terms of, I just wonder if it's going to create more animosity between an organization that I guess is trying to do good, but going about it in a way that feels quite confrontational.
So more harm than good. I think if you're a player who's associated with it, you might actually be thinking, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to pick and choose which bits I do support. And actually, you can't get behind an organization that's trying to take down the tool that you're very much a part of, which I think would be quite tricky because there aren't any really, really top tier players who are involved in this one. So I do think one thing I was going to say, Kim, it does feel like it's at the moment, there is a bit of a time of a flux that's happening in terms of the fact that there is a look at the potential rescheduling of the calendar, a relook at the calendar. That rumor mill said it was presented to the Slam. The Slam said no. We are looking at these 2-week formats. Do you think that tennis is at a point where they feel like they might be able to change it because some things are up in the air and some things that we haven't questioned are being questioned, and they're trying to kind of see this is their opportunity to put everything in there and see if they can do something?
Yeah, I mean, it might be time now. I mean, that's why they've done the lawsuit now at this time, because everything's sort of a bit up in the air and there's room for change. And like you said, Joel, we've seen recent positive changes from the WTA tour with like the maternity allowance and program. So I think maybe they've sensed that and that's why it's come at this time. But I mean, rather worryingly, they've announced a second lawsuit because rumors have it, there's been reports that via the BBC that the PTPA filed the second lawsuit because the ATP were reaching out to players wanting them to sign pre-prepared statements that said that they didn't know about the legal action. So the PTPA have sort of are trying to get an order that prevents the ATP, WTA, etc., from communicating with players about this lawsuit.
Goodness.
So it's really is sort of causing quite a lot of animosity, divisions, and I think right now I don't know how long this process is going to take. When are we likely to see a resolution to this? Because lawsuits can drag on and on and on, and if this doesn't get resolved, I mean, do you think there's a chance that we will just see a splinter tour ever getting set up, or a breakaway, or will the players that form this kind of core not actually be bold enough to go all the way? Is it sort of smoke without fire? Are they willing to kind of really stand behind this 163-page lawsuit?
I don't think it will go that far. I'm not sure there's the support behind this. I'm not sure we will see this have its day in court. I'm not sure the PTPA would necessarily want that, because there's lots of things in here that I do think when you put a lot in there, there's a lot you can be pulled apart for. And this isn't like it's one individual incident like Jannik Sinner playing at 3 a.m. that they're talking about. There's so many different things that are a part of this. So I don't think we're going to see it in court. I think it might get thrown out, to be honest. But I do think it does make it clear that players could be earning more money by not playing on the tour. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that this is about, is the fact that they are the talent, but they have to play within the restrictions of these tours. And I think that issue is not going to go away. I think that's why it's so important, unfortunately, for Saudi investment to go into the ATP and WTA tours. Otherwise, there could be a rival tour set up, like in golf, for example. I think that is the threat. That is the worry. And the fact the tours are working with them probably means that the door will be closed for something like the PTPA to actually do anything else.
Yeah.
So where do we think the happy medium kind of lies? Keep it within the existing framework, but really push for change within that structure?
I think some stuff you could improve. I think there's some things that players would get on board with, and they talk about regularly, the scheduling side of things. I think that's where the wins can be. I don't think the wins are going to be, trying to allow players to do whatever they want, whenever they want, for whatever money they want. And I don't think that bringing in some of the ITIA issues with Jannik Sinner, for example, is the right place for this lawsuit. And the favoritism that exists potentially. It just feels like there's so much, it can't go anywhere. And I think if you want to change something, probably in any walk of life, you have to focus on something you want to change and almost lobby for that. And this doesn't feel like they're lobbying for something specific.
Yeah.
It feels like it's just going to be a lot of noise spread about.
And as you said, like going back to kind of the fact that they spoke about it being on the base of the kind of the tennis players, representing the tennis players, when so few have really put their name to it, including Novak Djokovic. I think that's quite telling in terms of how many are willing to put their signature where their mouth is, and actually it's still quite small. So I still wonder whether, like, you can say all these things, but without that groundswell of support from the players, how much of an impact and influence is it going to have?
It's got to come from the players, right?
And I know we have the player councils with the ATP and WTA, and I do feel like there is more that can be done there. I feel like these structures have been around for ages, and I wonder how much influence these they actually have. But I feel like that to me is like the best way for change to happen. But it almost does make me think like it's sort of a bit too watered down and like too heavily regulated, and like for real change that's going to benefit maybe the players to happen.
Also, it's long, isn't it? Maybe they didn't have the chance to read it. If they made it a bit shorter, maybe more players would have read it.
These players have like they have their own careers.
They're busy. They're playing board games.